Hey y'all, Tracy here with Just Dig It Farms, but we're not at the farm today. We're on a little bit of a field trip. We are at my favorite nursery in the world, Petals From The Past, and we're gonna spend the day hanging out with Jason Powell, owner and operator of Petals, and Jason with Cog Hill's gonna be here today. So we're gonna have a fun day. We're gonna learn all about roses, old, antique, heirloom, garden roses. We're gonna learn about pruning roses. I promised y'all a video last year on pruning roses with Jason, so we are here today and it's gonna be a fun day. And if you have a love and a passion for roses like I do, then this is the video for you.
I went to graduate school and I got out there and I met the fella who wrote this book called Antique Roses for the South. His name is Dr. Bill Welch, and he just retired officially from Texas A&M this past year. And I was so fortunate to get out there and get a chance to visit with Dr. Welch and decide I wanted to come to school here because here's a guy who's writing about and gardening with a unique group of plants. These are plants that our grandmothers grew. So over that 2-year period while I was at Texas A&M, every weekend I spent out at he and his wife's weekend home in Round Top, Texas. And if any of you know about Texas, Round Top is at the foothills of the hill country in Texas. And Round Top is famous for many things. An internationally recognized antique festival, and literally the poorest soil in the entire state of Texas. It's called Lufkin Clay Loam. It's horrible. That's the kind of soil that he was gardening with. So over those 2 years I gardened with him and I learned the answer to my original question. He was gardening and writing about antique roses for the South, perennials, the Southern heirloom garden, because these plants are survivors. They're still here after droughts, after hurricanes, after blizzards, after floods. These are the plants that are surviving and being passed along from one generation to another, whereas a lot of newer introductions sometimes can't even make it through the first summer in Chilton County, Alabama. And so I can remember being a couple of months away from graduation and Dr. Welch called me into his office. I had gardened with him for that year, over a year and a half. And he said, Jason, your mother's called. She'd like to know if you know what you want to be when you grow up. I said, oh yeah, I know what I want to do. I'm going back home to Alabama and I'm going to start a nursery that can be devoted to tough plants for southern gardens. And that's where we began. And that's why the name Petals From The Past. In the year 2000, my dad retired from Auburn University and I hired him immediately. And so I want you to ask him when you see him if he's not working harder for less than he ever did. I can tell you the answer to that question. And thankfully, while I was able to hire him, I was able to hire my mom and got a package deal. And she does all of our propagation. So this Lamar rose that I was mentioning to you that is rooted from the stem cutting, that's my mom's handiwork. Thankfully, she does all of our rooting and all of our propagation. And so that's a little bit of background. But one more very important detail I got to tell you to give you a little bit of additional background is while I was at Texas A&M, not only did I get an opportunity to work with a phenomenal professor and a great experience in that garden, and I got a degree, but most importantly, I met a young lady named Shelley, who is the most knowledgeable plants person I have ever met, and I convinced her to marry me and move back home to Alabama. So, just between us, she's still looking for the oil I promised was here in the North Carolina. And yesterday, we celebrated 27 years of the American Rose Society is kind of the authority when it comes to roses. And they define an antique rose as any variety that was introduced prior to 1867. So historically, that sets up a really nice timeline. What happened in 1867? That's the year the first modern hybrid tea rose was introduced. So it sets a really good pattern. In 1867, a variety named La France was introduced. Everything pre-existing that is considered an antique. We grow antique roses and tough old garden roses. We consider any rose that's been in existence 75 years or more to be an old rose, to be an old garden rose. And we consider if it has 3 characteristics. We are evaluating roses that we're working with, modern or antique, on 3 main characteristics. When we look back at the roses our grandmothers grew, what we find, thankfully, more often than not, is fragrance. When we look at the roses our grandmothers grew, we find roses that smell like roses. Doesn't that seem like a silly thing to say? But when you look back at the history of roses, you're looking at classes that have been introduced over a period of time, from the late 1700s, early 1800s, when European explorers first began looking for roses. At that time, they had centifolias, damasks, and gallicas. Those were the early European roses. Well, as they traveled to China and the Far East, they discovered China's roses that had been in cultivation 1,000 years before the birth of Christ were right over there for the taking. And they found a natural cross, the old garden tea we're going to talk about, also there. And in the 1830s, that was the variety. They brought those roses back to England and to France, and natural crosses occurred, and then crosses within their gardens occurred. And then we had the development of all types of classes, bourbons and Portlands, a repeat flowering damask, polyanthus, noisettes. All of these great classes were born after crosses that had occurred through the old original species roses, or the Portlands or the damasks, and then the modern varieties that evolved. And so what we see over the timeline is that as we move through the history of the rose, we've got the original forms that have fragrance. But when we get to the early 1900s, the turn of the century, hybrid teas were the dominant form. After 1867, when that first hybrid tea was introduced, that was kind of the focus. And then the florist industry can play a role. And you know what the florist industry wanted? They wanted long stems, great big flowers, brighter colors. And they bred for that, and they bred for that, and they bred for that. And part of that breeding bred out the fragrance. And so when we go back to these roses that our grandmothers grew, we're going to find good fragrance. The second, when you think about modern hybrid teas, if you've grown them, that was my first introduction to roses. They grow upright and angular to produce those long stems. But when we look back pre-hybrid tea, we find roses that really are as wide as they are tall. So rather than angular and upright, hybrid tea to me looks soldier-like. We go back to the old garden roses, and I think they're better described as fat and happy. You know, full from the bottom to the top. So in addition to fragrance, in addition to great shape, when we talk about the roses our grandmothers grew, we have disease resistance. Pre-1867 is before garden hoses, before chemical companies that were producing pesticides, and before irrigation systems. So, again, further evidence that these roses are still here today only because of their ability to survive and thrive. Because after hybrid teas took the forefront from the late 1800s to the early 1900s, old garden roses were forgotten about. They were planted at home sites. They were planted in cemeteries, and they were forgotten about. Well, thankfully for us, they survived. And in the 1930s, we can thank Mrs. Keyes from Maryland for going about her land in Maryland and finding old roses, getting excited about them, writing about them for the Rose Annals at the time, and later on a book in 1935 called The Old Garden Rose. And she began a movement and was influential enough to even impact California. And that began a movement out there. And all of this kind of stirred around until the 1970s, and that's when we began to see a real renaissance. And we saw movements again in the Northeast, in California, and in Texas as well. And we saw all of these articles being written. We saw people going out to these old home sites, out to these cemeteries to find forgotten treasures. These roses that survived despite us were now becoming more of interest as garden specimens. When we decided, hey, we can get fragrance, we can get shape, and we don't have to spray to maintain these roses, we can really add some tough stalwarts to our garden. And so from the 1970s on, there's been really a Renaissance movement, and that to me is very, very encouraging. And so then I got introduced to these guys in the 1990s, and I fell in love with the whole concept. And what I learned through Dr. Welch's guidance was that there is a landscape use for these old garden roses, any landscape use. If you have 6 hours of sunlight or more, you can grow these roses as ground covers. You can grow them as low shrubs. We can grow polyanthus in containers. We can grow large hedges. We can do small climbers over arbors that will help point people which way you want to go through your garden. I have got big ramblers that will swallow your neighbor if you need to get rid of somebody. I've got roses for that, so no problem. But that was what was eye-opening, because Prior to that, I only knew about hybrid teas, and hybrid teas are a spectacular class of roses, specifically if you enjoy cutting, if you like competition. But there's also an underappreciated group over here that are just great landscape opportunities, for sure. And so, at any rate, a little bit of history of the rose there. A heading back cut is simply when you go in there and you just kind of mow over it, right? It's going to force branching from within 3 to 4 inches of wherever you've made that cut. A thinning out cut is when you're trying to go into that plant and eliminate and remove canes so that you don't get any more growth. Thinning out cuts are definitely appropriate when you have dead canes. You've got canes that have died all the way back. Let's go in there to the point that it originated, clip and remove it. If you've got more canes than you need, you can make thinning cuts by going in there and removing those long canes. If you're looking at shrubs, oftentimes we're making more heading back cuts. We're reducing the height. And what we're going to talk about this afternoon when it comes to pruning is we're going to talk first about repeat flowering shrubs. When is our timing? And why are we pruning? We're pruning, remember, because roses don't make a permanent network of canes, and any pruning that we do is going to stimulate new growth. New growth is going to result in great blooms. So if we take a rose like Lamar that we were talking about here, that's a great shrub rose, the first key time for pruning roses is February. February is National Rose Month. The reason we talk about pruning this time of the year and planting is because it's the time that you can do all the above. February is the first month when we can go in and we can do the most severe pruning that you're going to do all year long. With recently planted roses or established roses, I like to look at repeat flowering shrub roses for the opportunity to come in February and reduce the height by 1/2 of all the growth that it made the previous year. 1/2, and this is our one opportunity to do it. If we do it in February and we reduce that height by 1/2 of all the growth that it made in a curved dome shape, the resulting growth is going to be new growth down low, in the middle, and up high. And that's where you're going to concentrate your repeat flowering shrub roses this time of the year. We're taking it down by about 1/2 of all the growth that it made. That's not paying attention to what direction the buds are facing, or which way, how many limbs we're leaving. With the old Chinas and the old garden teas and the polyanthus, it doesn't matter. They make so many canes and so many in every direction that if we go in and we reduce the height by 1/2 this time of the year, we can then look inside of that plant and we will see if there's any dead canes, we can remove them at that time. If there's a dead cane inside of it, instead of just doing the head back, we do this cut first, and then if we have any dead canes, we can go inside of that rose plant and remove that dead cane with a thinning out cut. So the two types of pruning cuts that you're making with roses or anything are important to know, whether you're thinning them out, pruning them back, or what have you. And this time of the year is when we can prune the hardest because we're going to get all that spring flush of energy coming out. Okay. We're going to shift to climber with pruning. And one of the things I like to establish is with climbing roses, you have two types of canes. You have structural canes and you have side branches. Your structural canes are what you're tying your rose to. If you bought a climbing rose, you have a picture in your mind. It could be for a fence, it could be for an arbor, it could be for a wall. But the picture in your mind is that you're going to attach that rose to that structure, and it's going to bring that structure to life and add interest to the vertical element. So structural canes are what we use to tie to the structure itself. And we're not worried about the blooms on the structural canes itself. It's the side branches that come off of that. That's where the blooms occur. So here's the structural cane. And look at this side branch, this side branch, there's a side branch, there's a side branch, there's a side branch, all the way up and down the length of it. And one of the most remarkable things about roses is that when you have canes on a climbing rose, if you go straight up, they will only bloom right on the tops of those canes. You take that same cane and turn it horizontally along the length of a fence or wrapping it around a post. Everywhere there's a leaf attached, inside the axle of that leaf, you have a bud. And if you go from straight up to horizontal, to horizontal, every single one of those leaf buds becomes a flower bud, just by changing the direction that it's going. So you can have a big, massive show simply by bending those canes and growing them horizontally. So one structural cane, multiple side branches. And then this time of the year, we're going to go ahead and prune those side branches. Here's that same structural cane from another angle, and we're coming in and we're reducing these side branches. Now, the thing about it is, I've got this rose, and my goal was to have it grow along the railing, to soften the railing. So I've got one structural cane tied to the top of the rail, and what I want are side branches that are coming out toward you so that I can keep the blooms right there. But look at this side branch. This side branch isn't coming out toward you and I, it's going straight up, and it's about a 5-foot cane that's leaning over onto the inside of the porch. So I do not want that. I actually have a side branch just below my clippers that's coming out here. So I can remove that cane completely with a thinning cut. I go in and clip it all the way out. That way it's out of the way. It's not going in the right direction. I want to leave the side branch that's coming out toward you, and then we'll clip that side branch to 6 to 8 inches. When it comes to a climber, and these are the climbers and the ramblers that you and I are putting on our arbors and our pergolas and our fences. We're not talking about ladybanks and those great big ramblers that we've got over in the fence. We're just letting them grow. But when you're growing a rose, a climber, on a structure that you want to bring attention to, and you're not wanting it to take over or block traffic, this is where we're talking structural canes, side branches. Side branches are shortened in February to 6 to 8 inches so that all of your bloom occurs around the structure. After maybe 20 some odd years, you lose a cane or two, it's making all these great new ones from the base, and you can tie that in. If you've got a great big one like we had Mermaid in the last hurricane that came through, blew the whole arbor over, broke the rose off, and we had to chainsaw prune that. New growth came right from the base, and we've retrained it and tied it in. So thankfully, with own root, old garden roses, we're going to have so many opportunities to grow and retrain. Do not be afraid to prune. You are not going to make a mistake that rose can't recover from, for sure. But with your climbers, you've got strategic canes that you're using for structural, for holding it together, and the side branches off of those, that's where the bloom, that's where the show is going to occur. Now with shrub roses like this one, here is Madame Lombard. This is an old garden tea. Look at the thickness of those canes. And look at that beautiful crimson colored new growth. That's an old garden tea, and I have pruned it in a curved dome shape. This is a rose that was at 5.5 to 6 feet before I pruned it, and I've reduced it to 3 feet, okay? And that's the growth. That's what we're after. We want full flowers and foliage from the bottom to the top. But we can't make that hard of pruning in May or June. We can do it in February. So when you come into February, reduce any new growth that rose has made in the previous year by 1/2 of whatever is there in a curved dome shape. And that's for repeat flowering shrub roses. Now, Katy Road Pink, which is the rose beside Madame Lombard there. Look at all that new growth. Here we are in February. It used to be that we could really wait till the very last day of February, but now it looks like we're getting, we wouldn't see all that new growth, but now we're getting new growth very early with our milder winters. And so this is pre-pruning on Katy Road Pink, okay? And then look at the base of it. And again, we're not talking about grafted or budded rose, so we've got all of these great canes. The older cane obviously here, the new younger reddish colored cane there, and that's the base. Okay? So we come in there, we're making cuts with our pruners, we're doing them at an angle, and I'm not worried, I'm not trying to show you the bud there. I'm not trying to if I can, I try to get as close to a bud as possible, but I'm also pruning a lot of roses. So what I'm going for is the overall shape and the reduction of that new growth by at least 1/2 on this repeat flowering shrub rose. Gray bark down here. Anywhere in that gray bark, you can't see buds, new buds trying to come out, but there are hidden buds right underneath that bark layer. If I want to come down, if it's too open down here, like she's talking about, I could bring that height down even right in here to 12 to 18 inches from the ground up. And it will encourage more breaks to occur. Even from where you see the gray bark, those buds are just sitting there waiting to come out. And if you remove the top growth, they'll push on out. What we're looking at is, again, flowers and foliage from the bottom to the top. If we don't do this pruning, we tend to get more growth out on the tips, not very much in the middle, and we get gangly and leggy growth. So by encouraging more side branches with pruning, we get a better show. So here is the original rose that was planted to help soften this picket fence in the front garden. It's a variety called Old Blush, and it's 27 years old now. It's the original rose. And so it is making canes constantly down here. And what I'm looking for is around 5 or 6 canes to go to the left, 5 or 6 canes to go to the right. This has a wonderful growth habit. When it makes new canes, they're 6, 8, 10 feet long. They don't make little short branches, right? These climbers make wonderful long canes. But what I want to do is take the canes that are naturally growing more to the right and tie them onto this fence. The canes that are going more naturally to the left and tie them on that fence. And the canes that are doing this and going out away from us, I need to remove them entirely. They're doing no good. In fact, if you look at these canes, think about where the blooms are going to be. They're going to be all out here. I want attention on the fence. These guys are going to be blooming way out here on the end. So what we're going to do here is, this is pre-pruning. We're going to follow those canes back to the point they originated, and that's the thinning out cut. Take it back to the point it originated. Now, on these side branches here, we're going to shorten those side branches to 6 to 8. That's the heading back cut. Okay? So pre-pruning, we've got these canes. See how we're trying to get these guys going this direction, try to get these guys going this direction. On that fence, I've only got about a 3.5 foot fence, so I can't support too many canes, and you don't need canes on top of canes because they only reduce the amount of air circulation, reduce the sunlight, and they scratch one another. So if we can separate the canes and not have them too crowded in there, it allows better air circulation, and then every bit of that surface area becomes blooms for certain. Okay. With that one, side shoots, that's what we're working on. So we've gotten rid, you can see we've gotten rid of these entirely, and now we don't have all that wild growth over there. That's on the ground. All of that can be rooted, by the way, and that way if you like this rose and you want to make more of it. Then we've got these canes that are pulled over, and we're going to shorten those side branches to about 6 or 8 inches. Maybe you've got a rose pillar or a post in the ground. What I love about this one, this is one called American Pillar. And here's the post where the structural canes are growing around, and then we're taking it down the wire. And now we've got to take those side branches and shorten them back to the structure. I want for all the blooms to occur. Y'all remember this photograph? This was the American Pillar that was flowering from the bottom all the way up to the top of that post and then down the wires. The structural canes are in place. There's 4 structural canes there braided. And the side branches are now all that we're addressing. We're reducing them to 6 or 8 inches so that that whole post will be lit up with flowers. And look at that network. I mean, that is busy, busy, busy. So the older gray canes are the structural canes. All that beautiful young tender growth is all the new growth. But you can see how it's woven in there together. And this is the one time of year in February when you can actually see behind the scenes because most of them are without foliage. And again, side branches, we're shortening those side branches. On American Pillar, these side branches are out there 6 or 8 feet away from the post, completely taking away from the actual original goal. And then look at this, I like this. Here is the structural cane. That is the main cane that's being tied to the wire. So you can follow that main cane. From last year, look at the side branches. Those are the fruit. Those are the hips that were made. We left those for the birds to enjoy. And now, this is our job. We come in and leave the structural cane alone, and we shorten those side branches. Cut, 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 cut. So shorten those side branches. That way, when we make that heading back cut, that means that bud, and that bud, and that bud can then make flowers. Yeah. Look at where the old inflorescence was. So the spent blooms were there, and all over. Catarina Zimei is a really, really nice, fragrant, repeat flowering polyantha. So this is the class we can use in those low front of the border type of options. You can also use them in a container. You know, this has got that kind of a option as well. So when we're going in and reducing it, this is the time of year where I want to come back in and I want to reduce by 1/2 of whatever growth is there in a curved dome shape. So it's a nice opportunity to really use a longer handle pair of pruners, and then you can trim up and neaten with your short handle pruners if you'd like. Because when you're pruning, you're stimulating growth just like you are when you're fertilizing, and if you're doing both, you will keep those roses blooming and jumping for sure. Now, if we didn't have all of this good new growth, I could come back in here and reestablish the new height below that at 6 or 8 inches and force it to make more new growth. But look at all this good new growth. I think this is a good sign of health with all those blooms nice and uniform. So I'm not going to work into the old growth. I'm going to work with the new growth like you and I were talking about.
So show us where you cut it last time. And
yes, you can see a cut right there. You can see where the cut was made.
And you're just going to take off a half.
And now I got all this new growth, so I'm going to cut that in half. And what I want to end up with is really just a curved dome shape. So when we look at that new growth, you can start on the left side, you can start on the right side. I am not looking at which direction the stems are facing or which direction the buds are, but when I can get down in here to 1/2 of that height, I'll be able to see more clearly also into the interior of the bush, and then I can see if I left any snags or any dead canes. Now,
you're still doing a half of the new
half
growth.
of the new growth, half of the new growth. That's right. And don't worry, if you go below that, you want to do at least half of the new growth this time of the year. You can go below that this time of the year, for sure. But you want to at least get down there half of that new growth. So we're reducing that new growth that they made by 1/2. We're getting rid of all the old spent blooms. I'm looking inside to see if I've got any dead canes to work with. And then I've got a cane coming from the inside of the bush. This is about the only opportunity I'd ever have to really clip that out. So we'll open that up. Little twiggy stuff that's down in there we don't need. And then we're looking along along that edge. And then we can go right across the top. Just clipping. And what I want to finish out with is on that new growth, just about half removed. It sets us up for this next flush of bloom that will occur right across there. And again, we're not paying attention to which direction the stems are facing. We're just getting in there and reducing that height. I've got all this great new growth, and all of that bloom can occur right through there. But if we didn't have all that new growth, we could come right in here just like we're talking about. And look at this older cane here. That one has no new growth. This is my perfect opportunity to get in there. I can actually see it. And we'll cut that out. It's just an old dead cane, get rid of it, and then that way we're ready to roll. This is that 2-inch layer of pine bark mulch I was talking about. We pull it out, and look at those roots right there. I'm tickled to see that. But this is not an easy spot to grow. This guy's having to compete with this crepe myrtle. And thankfully, it's tough enough to do it. But look down here. Can you see that new growth that's coming from the base as well? So if we needed to, we literally could come in here and cut these guys all the way down. It would be replaced by the new growth, and it's all the same variety of rose. So curved dome shape. Half of the new growth that it made from the previous year. We actually can start a little bit earlier than we used to. If we wait till, it used to be that nobody ever went out until the end of February to prune their roses. Well, my Lord, if we wait till too long in a mild winter, you got blooms that are already coming out. So I think you ought to start by Valentine's Day in central Alabama and be done by the first week of March. I think that's our window for severe pruning. And that's going to give us the best results for sure. Because I planted this with a little grouping of 3, I'm growing them as a low hedge. So I'm going to try to get them, you know, fairly even one with the other. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 nice canes that are healthy on this rose. You can see some that are getting a bit older that we'll be able to replace with younger canes very soon. And then kind of a curved dome shape for sure. And so again, the flowers are going to occur right, you know, make that flush of growth, and the flowers are right there where we want them at the base of this guy. After 15 years, I can come in and cut this rose cane right there, underneath this bark. Look at that.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
it's like on cue, for sure. You can see all that new growth. There are buds all up and down the length of that cane. Just wait. Look at this new growth that came up from that cane. These are on root. They're all great roses, but look at this cane. This cane has died out completely. So we'll take it out entirely while we leave this newer one. And then this rose is not, it's having to create the fullness that these roses have, but it's doing it with fewer canes. So it'd be a really, really ideal opportunity after it bloomed for me to come back in and cut that back. But you could do it this time of the year if you don't have as much growth. This has got a lot of nice, healthy growth on it. But if you don't have that much growth, by all means, go ahead and cut it. Exactly, exactly. So we just even them up, get that growth in here, and again, encouraging it with pruning. We're going to get side branches. We're going to get our spring flush of bloom in about 6 weeks. We'll have bloom on these guys. And again, just kind of a curved dome shape. But our window, Tracy, like you're talking about, is really Valentine's Day through the first couple days of March. Yeah. So if I have a cane like this one that was crisscrossing and it was rubbing against the other, I'd remove it. Yeah. And this is the only time of year that you can actually see how to do that. So we thin it, we take the height down, get rid of the snags and the little dead portions of canes from last year that we didn't see, because those are just opportunities for insects and diseases to get in there. If we go straight up, you remember how we talked about it will only bloom on the top of the arbor. We've got to have these side branches. And when you look at this, this is the part where it gets really exciting. And you look at where all of these new red growths are, where all of that new growth is there. All of this growth right here, all along there, that, everything we're looking at there with those new buds, that's all flowers. Those are all flowering opportunities. But right in here, look past that and find your structural canes. What we want to try to do with our roses on these arbors is establish canes that will allow us to grow up and over the arbor, but the side branches that come off of those structural canes are where all the show, that's where all the bloom is going to occur. So this time of the year, thankfully, we don't have too much wild growth going on, but we do have a strong base here that's a little bit older, and we've got new canes that are coming off from beneath it. But what I want to look for typically is first, look for any dead canes. You can see I've got some dieback right there. So that's an easy mark. We can take that back along to wherever there's new growth. With this one, I can see a dead cane, no leaves, no leaves, no leaves. You can see there's new growth there. So that's an easy first cut to make. We'll go in, remove the dead, and then we're looking down through there. I've still got, you see that brown cane there as well? So that's an easy one to come in and identify. We've got a clip, it's alive back to there. So the cane only died back during the year last year to maybe half of the growth. So we can go in, we'll remove that dead cane, and then we know what we're working with. I like to use this stretchable material because as the canes are getting larger, you can continue to get that great growth. But these are really nice. These are those soft ties that we were talking about. That's this kind of material that's great. It does have a small, tiny wire inside of it, so I never try to put it around them tight. I always leave a little bit of growth space, a little bit of growth room. I also love to work with this jute twine. It is really, really nice. So when we've got these climbers, the first thing we do is we come in and we look to see on our structural canes how many we have. Do we have enough? Do we have too many? We're only going to get our spring show is always going to be the best. That's Toby. He's part of the welcome committee. Okay, so I also want to look to see. All right, we've got these structural canes. Do we have anything that's overgrown or going too far out away, or do we have opportunities like this where we can take it from a structural cane that we can take from here and let it run down the post? Remember, we're getting ready for a great spring show. I'm looking for any opportunity to get great blooms. If you don't like it afterwards, you can always come back and prune it out. A number of canes like we have here. Make sure that the side branches are flipped and to where when it blooms, it's going to be right. So when we look at structural canes down here, I'm going to start with this one and then we'll come over to that one. We're seeing lots going on in the garden right now, thankfully. We've got poppies that are germinating. The Johnny Jump Ups are coming up. I don't know who planted all this henbit, Tracy.
I don't know. It wasn't me.
Yeah, no, I don't know where that stuff came from. But I'll look down here for our structural canes, and I'm looking for good, strong growth that's come last year. The thing I love about a climber like Zephyr and Druin is look how flexible that thing is. We can pull these out, we can move them around, especially nice with a thornless rose. But what I'm looking for is to be able to have at least, oh gosh, one cane every 6 to 8 inches, something in that range. And I've got to replace a cross piece that I lost last year also, so that I can have another place to tie it to. You want to have opportunities to be able to attach them all the way through. And so typically what I look for is enough opportunity to come in and either reduce the number of canes that we've got, or if I can incorporate and use them and separate them, then we're in good shape. And make a heading back cut. That's going to leave me plenty of blooms down low. I'm going to make another cut right there. That's going to result in blooms right there rather than out here. Again, I've got another good side branch right there. I can clip, and then boom, I've got a nice growth. Again, another side branch coming from that. We've tied it in last year and didn't really need to. So I've got a good side branch there with the blooms out here. I'm wanting all of the bloom as close to the arbor as possible. And then I want to take and put that energy into these canes, these structural canes, to get up and over the arbor. I've got a dead cane there also, so we can definitely get that guy out of there. And that way it can not be a source of potential contamination. That one's tied there. I'm going to be able to continue to go up and over the arbor with that one. I'll get a little bit of separation here. I've got to wait to time till I come back and put my cross piece in there. But then I'm going to basically take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and maybe 10. And I'm going to tie them just going straight over. We're getting some good side branches from them already because I've pruned them, and then we'll go up and over the arbor. I'll give it a little bit of an attachment right there with a little room to grow. And then we'll keep on going. And then once we got enough overlap here, and we've got enough overlap from either side, again, side branches will keep to 6 to 8 inches, and ideally we're covering the whole surface from this side up and over. And then from Rev Door, this is an apricot, this is a cerise pink. Let them come right to the middle, and then I can stop it. And what you're looking at is you're looking at your structure. Is it too far away, like that one? Is it too far away from your structure when it blooms that you're going to lose the show? So look at this. This is a prime example. Side branch is way out here. Let's shorten it back. Let's keep the bloom right there where we want it, for sure. And somewhere around 6, 7 canes spaced apart, at least 3 or 4 inches apart, as evenly as we can, and then take them up. If they're going straight up, prune them about every 3 feet to force them to side branch. Continue to grow that up and over, and then keep the side branches clipped to the arbor itself. This is constantly making canes. There's 20 plus canes in there. They're crisscrossing all over. And this is not one of those roses that you have to worry about it being an overlapping cane. These are thinner cane chinas. So they're generally, you're not talking about something that's going to rip the other cane up. So we don't have to have it perfectly layered. We can have multiple branches, but the idea for the climbing rose on this picket fence was to soften the picket fence, right? And give us a little bit of screen off of the propane tank as well. So you remember in that photograph that we were always getting these branches, these climbing canes that shoot out and go out away from the fence. So instead of making a heading back cut like that, which would result in more new growth coming out and the same problem, we're going to make a thinning out cut. We'll take it all the way back to the point it originated and get rid of it right there. There's some dead little snags in there as well. And then we're done with it. Now, this is a main cane, and then these are side branches that are coming off of it. I kind of like having that main cane going over toward the propane tank, but this side branch, I don't mind having a few blooms, so I'm gonna make a heading back cut. So I'll get blooms right there from this. This one is one of those side branches that's going straight up through the middle. We don't even need it for certain. So we'll make a thinning out cut on that. And you can't even tell we've removed it, right? But look at the flower buds on these old chinas. They are the first roses, remember, to bloom in the spring, and then the last ones to finish at Christmas, for sure. What we're wanting with this rose was, of course, we want to soften this fence. And so, watch those thorns. So what we're gonna get here, when we look at this cane, look at canes like that. But this way, we've set the stage, and all the bloom, everywhere that you see these new growths, all that's gonna be bloom in about 4 weeks. And so it makes a great, great show for certain. So climber on an arbor, climber on a fence. We're trying to allow the canes that can go this way. I'm not trying to pull a cane from here and take it over that way. I want to take it the direction it's naturally growing already. But you can see all that bloom's going to occur right along here. Now, after it finishes that spring bloom, I can then come back if I need to. If I've got more canes than I need, I can come back and thin out, flip them away. It just makes more. Straight up. That little, where it's done all the side branching right there, that's where all the flowering is going to occur. When you go straight up like that, in 2 years growth, all the flowering is occurring right there. If we take that same cane and we wrap it around and we braid it like this, then we get blooms all the way up and down the length of it. And it can be a tighter weave or it can be a looser weave. It doesn't matter. As long as you're bending that cane, you're changing the distribution of nutrients, of everything else, and you get flowering buds rather than having vegetative buds. Look at these, with this post, we don't have anything planted in front of it or around it, so I want flowers and foliage from the bottom to the top, for sure. This one is coming out the furthest away, so I think it's going to be one of my last choices to work with, for certain. In fact, you might hold on for that one. For sure. And then what I want to look for are the canes that are coming out the closest to it. And if there's canes that are naturally growing more around to the right, then we're in good shape. Oh, sorry. Did y'all see she fell asleep? Wake her up. See, that'll teach us. Now, this is the main cane. This is a side branch, so it's an easy decision to go ahead and clip that to about 4 to 6 inches. So on this one, we'll pull it out. This is going to be one of our main canes, and likely one that we'll use to tie all the way around. But it's got a side branch here. We always shorten those side branches this time of year to 4 inches or so. So we'll pull that out. We're going to see what we can get working with and what'll grow, and then. Same thing here. We've got some really nice branches here, but a lot of side branches for sure, and that's going to be a nice one to start around there. So that's a nice, excuse me, that's the main branch, that's a side branch, this is a side branch, that's a side branch. So we'll be able to take this guy, there you go, we'll be able to take this one right the whole way around. We've got 8 or so canes, twice as many as we need to have, so we've got plenty of choice, and we can be pretty choosy on these guys. Hey, this is Jason Powell here at Petals From The Past with my friends Jason Smith and Tracy Britnell, and we're excited. We're going to be able to get together on Saturday, April the 23rd for our Antiques in the Garden show, and we're excited about a YouTube meet and greet event. I wanted Jason and Tracy to tell you a little bit about it.
Yeah, come out on Saturday, April 23rd, and we will have a meet and greet where you can meet a whole bunch of your favorite garden, homesteading, farming YouTube channels that are kind of local here in the Southeast. And Tracy can tell you who's all coming.
Yep, it's going to be
me, Jason, Cog Hill Farm.
Is Mary Carl coming?
Mary Carl's supposed to be coming.
Awesome,
Good.
awesome.
Yep.
So, Cog Hill Farm.
Yes.
Jean and me with Just Dig It Farms. There's Greg and Sheila Key with Hoss Tools. And they have a cool row by row garden show.
They do have a great show.
And there's Wes and Angie Blair with Naked Hawk.
And their kids are coming too.
Are they?
Yep.
Are they coming?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. I didn't know that. And there's Jason and Lauren with Cattywampus Acres. And there's Holly Miner with Simply Lake and Lace. She used to work here.
Yes, she did.
She helped with the displays and
all
everything.
The displays.
Yeah. And there's Kayla Friday with Little Cahaba Junkin. And we're going to be here from 9 to 5. I think we're being set up by the pond
Right
over
by the pond,
here.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome.
One-man band.
One-man band, absolutely.
What
Lots of
else we got
vendors.
going on?
Lots of antique, craft, and collectible dealers. A couple of very good food vendors as well.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
Awesome.
going to be a fun day.
It's a fun day. It's actually a 2-day event.
That's right.
It's
That's right.
Friday the
Friday.
22nd and Saturday the 23rd, but the YouTubers meet and greet is only going to be on the Saturday from 9 to 5. So we're looking forward to meeting
All of y'all. Yes, absolutely.
We are. And I had suggested earlier when I was talking about this that we are on the way to the beach here.
That's right.
So
That's right.
if you're going to the beach,
Swing by.
make you a trip to the beach and come by and see us because we are excited to meet everybody.
It's going to be a great day.
Yeah,
Great
it is.
day.
It's going to be a fun day.